just drilling down a little bit more. It just talks about, if you've got a product that says, zero minimal hazard, that's really good. But you can't stop there. Yes, it may be zero minimal hazard. You need to still look at the chemicals. You need to ensure that there's nothing in there that might affect your client. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on this page, but it's helpful to kind of prioritize products as you're looking at MSDS information. Aside from the MSDS, you also want to look for what's called environmental product declarations. How many of you have come across products that have this? They're just really emerging onto the marketplace, and what they do is they look at life cycle assessment, and they really take into account at least 12 different categories, which we'll look at here in a second. But what I want to talk about here is that the ULI, who we've known forever to certify our lighting products, there's now UL Environment. And UL Environment is coming up with an independent environmental claim around healthy products. And they're also looking at all of the other categories within LEED that we look at, recyclability, recycled, renewable, etc. But for me, for this particular presentation, I really focused on that. They will be putting together a database of products that meet a certain level of criteria. And this is an organization that's 115 years old. So we know that there's some really good reliability around here. GreenGuard, how many of you have gone to the GreenGuard website and specified products from there? GreenGuard just actually partnered with them. So GreenGuard will now be partnering with ULI or ULE in order to just get more of that promotion out there for products. Then beyond that, we have the ISO 14025, and that's the International Standards Organization. And they are, again, really looking at the health and toxicity of products. That is an international organization that is going to be providing us with an environmental product declaration. Very comprehensive and very transparent, and that's what you want to look for. Okay. Here's just an example of environmental product declarations and what they take into account. So, they're not only looking at global warming and acid rain, but they're also looking at indoor air quality and human health. Those are really the factors in this particular presentation that we're focusing on of importance. Because you can have a green product, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a healthy product. And sometimes vice versa. So, as Sarah said in the beginning, it's important at the beginning of a project, or whenever you get on board, like when I got on board later, to understand what the priorities are on the project and really know what those goals are.
A good example of that is no VOC paint. A lot of no VOC paint has carcinogens in. So it's understanding what you're looking for.
So you can have a no VOC paint, meaning it has no emissions, but the content of that paint might still have a carcinogen in it. They're different. All right, next one. Yes?
So how do you prioritize with your client? How do you get them to understand?
I will talk about that.
Sarah will talk about that. Yeah, it's a good question though. So how do you prioritize with the client? And I have to say that I actually got hired by this client for the Denver project, which is now coming back on board. And then I got thrown into the Aspen project, and Sarah was amazing. Her team was really, really good about trying to manage this client, because you do, in a very respectful and compassionate manner, want to manage the client, because there's just an overwhelming amount of information. And when I would send the documentation that I would find and put together, I mean, it was, sometimes 10 pages long for insulation. We'll talk a little bit about insulation, because we literally spent 6 weeks.
Insulation's hard.
Researching insulation, because not only do you have the health issues to deal with, but you've got the thicknesses and the slopes and the R factors and everything else that goes into a renovation. New construction might be a little easier. So what you're seeing here then are just an example of some indoor air quality certifications and standards. Most of us are familiar with these as LEED APs. They come up, as a priority under the rating system. But these are some of the ones that are specifically very good. I'm also going to mention that, if you look for product that is applicable or has a compliance with California Section 01350, that also means it's meeting a very high level of indoor air quality. That's usually for solid finish materials. And we all know about squamid and green seal. So
I think, getting to your question a little bit, one thing in the project that we're talking about today, GreenGuard was a certification that was really important to our client. If it was safe enough to be in schools and with children, she was feeling confidence from that. So it's figuring out what certifications really resonate with the client and having that as part of our
Priority,
checklist.
yeah, exactly. And so usually what I would do is I would go straight to first building green and then Green Guard to look for product alternatives if the original product that the designer had selected wasn't applicable. And then on the next slide, again, a few more examples of those. You know, some of the things that are coming out that are really exciting, and they're actually in this report. It is for purchase, but it's a great report that Building Green put together. I don't know if any of you have a copy of this. It's called the Green Building Product Certification. And I actually worked with Jennifer Atlee at Building Green to help review this and help give her some guidance from an interior design standpoint. And it's just a fantastic document. But some of the things that I want to mention is that there are new standards and third-party certifications coming out on the marketplace that you want to look for. For drywall, it's ULE, again, the UL Environment 100. It isn't a draft standard right now, but it's going to be on the marketplace soon. For carpet, most of us know about, Carpet and Rug Institute Green Label Plus, but in addition to that, there's also the NSF standard 140. For wood products, you're going to look for the CARB compliance, because you want to ensure that if it's compliant with, again, it's a California standard, 93-120, if it's compliant with that, it's going to be no added urea formaldehyde, and more than likely most of the adhesives will also fit the target that we're looking for. So those are just some examples of what's in this great document, and I don't want to go through all of them because literally this could take 2 hours just going through this. So then process of gathering information.
Annette, could you repeat the name of that?
You bet. It's called Green Building Product Certification. It's available for download at buildinggreen.com. And if you're a member of Building Green's suite, it's $49. If you're not, I think it's like $79. Well worth it. So as I mentioned, the next slide you'll see is Building Green. I mean, essentially, Building Green has been my Bible for the last 15 years as a sustainable designer. It's just a phenomenal place to go to find products. It's constantly updated. How many of you have a membership to Building Green? Get it. It is so well worth it. And what's phenomenal about the work that Alex and Nadav have done at Building Green is that they are not supported through advertising. So they are doing, they don't call themselves a third-party vetting organization, but that's really what they're doing. They're doing a phenomenal job. And you can find anything and everything under all the CSI divisions at Building Green. Then the second place that I would go on the next slide is Pharos. And Pharos is fairly new. What I love about Pharos is that there are two pieces to it. One of them is called the Chemical Library. And with the Chemical Library, what you would do is you actually can put in either your chemical name or that CAS number. Ideally, you want to have that CAS number because that's going to give you specifically what the chemical is. And then you enter that, and immediately you get this great report that shows you if there's any issues. Sometimes I type something in, no issues. It means zero, none. Other times it would come up and they literally flag things from green, being the healthiest, all the way up to black. And I would have 3 pages online of how bad this particular chemical was. These of those specifically are the different chemicals that they're looking at. All right, next page. So here, this is a great example. This is actually a screenshot, and I know it's really hard to read in the back. But essentially what they're looking at, and I actually printed the sheet because I knew I wasn't going to be able to remember all this. They're going to look at it from health and pollution standpoint, from user toxin, manufacturing and community toxins, end of life, global warming, air quality, and volatile organic compounds. That's just the health part. Then they look at environmental resources, social and community, and I won't go into those today because they're not pertinent to our discussion. But they are doing such an amazing job of going through and vetting products. There is, again, a membership fee for Pharos, but man, it pays for itself because there are other places to go. Like there's a list called the Chem Secretariat. It's an international list that has literally thousands of chemicals on it, and you can type in the chemical number, but all it tells you if it's red listed or green listed. It doesn't give you the details, where this literally gives you the details. So then I think we're on to the case study.
Great. Thanks, Annette.
You bet.
We're going to walk through a project that Annette spoke about that we just completed in Aspen. And part of the process of going through a project such as this that we've already talked about is establishing a team early on and then setting up a system of how materials can be vetted time frame for materials to be tested, any sorts of measurements from a touch and feel perspective, and then really understanding, okay, well, this worked on this one, how do we bring this into the next product? So it's not an exact science. I'm here to help you a little bit today on things that I learned on our next project, how things will be done, I think, a little bit differently and more efficiently. This is a duplex project that was built in the 1960s, the original owner. This is a project that was left open to the elements for 3 years. So when we were hired, it had a big mold issue going on. There was quite a bit of asbestos still left in the unit. So we really came into a big mitigation project before we could start adding and remodeling and doing the addition. So again, key strategies. Design, we were hired, we're architects, we love to design, so I think there's always a balance between finding the right materials, finding the healthy materials, but not sacrificing the design. And so that's where the team really is very important, and strengthening everyone along the way. We've talked about goals, and I cannot emphasize this enough. It's really important from the beginning of the project to establish the goals. In this project, again, we wanted to make an addition, we wanted to remodel, update this house so that it could work for multiple generations with this family, and it needed to work for one member of the family that had acute chemical sensitivity. Those were the goals from the beginning, and we also needed to get it built in 9 months. So we started design and built this in 1 year. And we had to deal with HOA approvals because it was a duplex. We're in the city of Aspen, which has its own complexities. So we established these goals early on. I will say one of the goals was there was a budget, but it was not the primary goal. When we were looking at materials, the goal was to get the best material that we could. Understand the sacrifices, maybe from a budget or schedule standpoint, so that's out on the table, but ultimately decisions were made about materials.
Based on health.
Yeah, based on health more at the end. That was kind of the global goals. Then actually getting into the building itself, there were certain things from an aesthetic standpoint that we wanted to do, and from a program standpoint. We can't forget that. It's you feel overwhelmed and you're doing this whole chemical sensitivity side and building a healthy home, but there's also the program at the end of the day that needs to be sought after. This is the existing building. It doesn't look like this anymore. This is Gable-Rama. We've got a duplex on the right, duplex on the left. And this is, when we got there, this is what we were up against. The duplex on the left is the one that we are working on. And here it is at the end of its completion. This was about in October. It has since been completed and the family stays there, and we've had 3 generations staying in the house, so that's really fun. So you can see we definitely modernized it, wanted an updated look while still achieving our chemical sensitivity goals.